Let's be honest for a second. By the late 1960s, the American muscle car scene was hitting a terrifying wall. Everyone had a massive block V8, and everyone had enough horsepower to melt rubber. But on the high banks of Daytona and Talladega, the problem wasn't horsepower anymore. The problem was the air itself. The 1968 Dodge Charger was a masterpiece of street design, but on a track at 180 miles per hour, it was a liability. Its beautiful recessed grille acted like a giant air scoop, and the rear window design created a vacuum that literally lifted the back of the car off the asphalt. While Ford was winning with the sleek Torino Talladega, Dodge drivers reported that their steering became light and useless at high speeds. Chrysler's racing boss, Robert McCurry, didn't want excuses. He famously told his team, "I don't care what it takes, find a way to win or start looking for new jobs." This wasn't just a corporate rivalry, it was a desperate fight against the laws of physics. Dodge did something that was absolutely unheard of in 1969. They stopped thinking like car mechanics and started thinking like rocket scientists. They brought in Gary Romberg and Robert Mixon from Chrysler's missile division. These guys spent their days designing nose cones for projectiles, not bumpers for cars. They took a Charger to the wind tunnel at Wichita State University, the first time a NASCAR entry had ever seen that level of aerospace testing. What they found changed everything. The air was hitting the flat nose of the Charger and creating a wall of resistance. The solution was an aggressive 18-inch steel nose cone. While some claim impossible numbers, official reports suggest it reportedly dropped the drag coefficient to around 0.30, an absolute breakthrough for 1969 that left every other manufacturer in a state of shock. Then came the wing. Every kid in America had a poster of that giant 23-inch stabilizer, but its design was a blend of high-tech aero and low-tech bureaucracy. The scientific reason was clear. The engineers needed the horizontal blade to be in clean air, far above the roofline turbulence. But the second reason is pure NASCAR gold, the stock car rulebook. NASCAR required that every car on the track have a functional trunk. To let that massive trunk lid swing open without hitting the wing, the engineers had to raise the bar to exactly 23 inches. It was a perfect engineering loophole. They used a specific aluminum alloy that could withstand over 1,000 pounds of downforce at 200 miles per hour. It was enough pressure to literally crush the rear suspension if the chassis hadn't been reinforced with heavy-duty steel plates. The debut of the Daytona was even more dramatic than the car itself. In September 1969, the fastest drivers in the world arrived at the brand-new Talladega Superspeedway. Within hours, legends like Richard Petty and Cale Yarborough realized they were in a death trap. The Daytonas were so fast that the tire technology of the day couldn't keep up. At nearly 200 miles per hour, the tire treads were literally disintegrating and flying off the rims. The top drivers demanded that NASCAR slow the cars down. When Bill France Sr. refused, the stars walked out in a massive boycott. NASCAR had to fill the grid with backup drivers. A rookie named Richard Brickhouse took the wheel of a Daytona and won the inaugural race, proving that even a newcomer could dominate if they were driving the Winged Warrior. The real peak of the Daytona's power came on March 24, 1970. Dodge wanted an official record that no one could dispute. They brought Buddy Baker to Talladega for a private test session. Baker wasn't just fast, he was clinical. On that afternoon, he became the first human being in history to officially lap a closed course at over 200 miles per hour. He hit 200.447 miles per hour. This wasn't just a win for Dodge, it was a psychological blow that the competition simply couldn't ignore. It was no longer a race of drivers, it was a race of technology, and Ford and Chevrolet knew they were suddenly miles behind in the aero department. So, why was it really banned? By 1970, NASCAR feared that continued aero development would push speeds past 220 miles per hour, on tracks that were never engineered for that level of sustained velocity. Bill France Sr. saw the writing on the wall. If he didn't stop the Aero Wars, the sport would become a high-speed suicide mission. But there was also a heavy dose of politics. The other manufacturers were furious and threatened to leave the sport. To save the show, France introduced a rule for the 1971 season that any car with a nose cone and a wing would be limited to an engine size of just 305 cubic inches, roughly 5 liters. This was a massive drop from the 7-liter Hemi engines they were built for. It was a technical execution. The winged warriors were phased out not because they failed, but because they were too evolved for their time. The final irony of the Daytona story is how much the public hated it at the time. To race the car, Dodge had to sell 500 units to the public. This was the homologation rule. Most people in 1969 thought the car was hideous. It was too long for most garages, and the nose cone was easily damaged in parking lots. Some Daytonas sat on dealership lots for over 2 years, gathering dust. Some desperate dealers even ripped the wings and noses off and sold them as regular Chargers just to get them off the lot. Imagine that. A car that today sells for over $1 million at auction was once considered so ugly that people paid to have it fixed. It stands as the ultimate symbol of a time when Dodge was brave enough to build a spaceship for the street, and NASCAR was too scared to let it keep flying. It is also worth noting that the Aero Wars weren't just about Dodge and Ford. They represented a brief, glorious window in time before the 1973 oil crisis, and rising insurance rates killed the muscle car era forever. The Daytona was the peak of that madness, a car so specialized it could only exist in a world that valued speed above everything else. Drivers from that era often said that even with the massive downforce, the car felt like a living thing, fighting you at every turn. The heavy steel nose cone added significant weight to the front, meaning that while it was stable at 200 miles per hour, braking was a terrifying gamble. Even today, modern engineers look at the telemetry from 1970 and shake their heads in disbelief. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered brilliance, the final, glorious roar of an era where the rules were written in tire smoke and high-octane dreams. So, let's settle this in the comments. Was the Dodge Daytona the greatest engineering achievement in muscle car history? Or was it just a cheat code that ruined the spirit of racing? I want to know if you would have been one of the people ripping that wing off in 1970, or if you would have seen the future. If you want more real, gritty stories about the cars the authorities tried to kill, you know what to do. Smash that subscribe button for the Torque channel and join the community of people who actually appreciate raw power. We've got plenty more high-octane history coming your way. See you in the next one.